Hey, this is just going to be a completely unscripted. I'm not even going to bother editing the audio on this one. This is just another one of the Squawks rant kind of things. It's not even a normal podcast. I just wanted to kind of get a rant out there about dittophobia because everyone's talking about it even a few times. I thought it was kind of one of those things was going to blow over, at least somewhat, and it kind of has, but I kind of wish it blew over more. Because Dittophobia represents a lot of problems I've always had with leaks and stuff. Also, sorry if the audio quality and all that isn't great. I'm still working on improving my audio setup. It's been really on the fritz lately, and I'm hoping it starts sounding. Really hope it starts sounding better. You also can see how you probably can hear how much I stutter and mess up lines through this. But not that there's any lines to mess up because it's all unscripted. So I will say that Dittophobia kind of represents everything I don't like about book leaks, because this is something that happens like every book leak, which is it will come out, we'll get all these descriptors of what's in it, right? And then it comes out and people go into the book now that they have it with what they were told about the book in mind. And I've seen this a few times. I think the most strong and obvious example of this was with Drowning, where people try to reverse engineer what they were told about the story via the leaks and the live readings and all that, and the theories from a lot of the people who get early, like Entom, into being what the story is about. But a few times, not always. GGY was probably the exception, where it felt like, with some exceptions, I feel like the leak was pretty solid about how it handled GGY, even though I feel like it was a little too Tales games oriented, but that's a whole separate argument where I'm like, I feel like if you're leaking or talking about stuff, you shouldn't be throwing your perspective or theories in. I feel like you should just talk about what's objectively happening. But that's my personal opinion. Some people, maybe you like the theories, maybe you don't. But GGY opposed to something like Drowning, where Drowning I felt like that was used just to confirm Cassidy Princess in any way possible, when in actuality there is not much in that story actually implying it. The strongest point is the one sentence about the princess and the fact that the main villain, the drowning girl herself, has black hair. The issue is several characters, especially in the Tales books, have black hair. Or not Tales books, I just mean the FNAF books in general. And the games. There's a lot of black hair in FNAF. And there are plenty of girls with black hair too. So it's like, that's not really a unique thing to Cassidy. And green is not really what I consider a Cassidy color. Not even in the context of, like, even under Cassidy Princess, it's not really a color connected to her. And that's, if she had, like, yellow veins and, like, glowing yellow eyes and said, like, it's me, and was glitching, or had this affinity for bears, or had, like, a picture of a bear on her shirt, was, like, a descriptor, that would be a real big golden threaded yellow flag. However, that doesn't happen in the story, really. The only connection you get to Princess... This is actually what I really didn't like about the leak. How I heard the leak was that Princess Quest was played by name. Like, that, I think it's Peggy is the name of the main character. All the damn books character names run together. I think it's Peggy is the main character. Kara is her friend who dies with the question mark. They kind of keep it... I think they kept it ambiguous in the story, didn't they? But... this is a little more fresh in my mind because I reread the book more recently to double check some stuff, because, like, is that how that was? It was just something in a particular discussion I was looking at. But the only ever things that really implied the whole Cassidy thing were people looking at the fact that Peggy has this whole rant about how every game she's ever played has an objective to it. That there is always something you are trying to do in a video game. And the reason she's thinking about that isn't like a thought process out of nowhere. That isn't unprompted. She's trapped in the VR situation thinking that she just has a really long timer. And is wondering maybe there's a way to get out of it early because there's this fucking freaky drowning girl chasing me. So she's like, all games have an objective, so maybe I just have to complete the objective. Or maybe I'll get to another level or something like that. And so she lists off a ton of different things, and they're all listed like back to back in the way that you would list off different things objectives, you know? So people saw stuff like solve the maze, save the princess, as reference to the Foxy maze and saving the princess at the end of Princess Quest, which is something we presume, even though it's technically not the goal of the game itself. I mean, like, unless it's one of those, it would have to be weird Tales book shenanigans where it's knowledge we don't have that characters arbitrarily do have. Which happens a lot in Tales, in my opinion, where it's like, how do you know that? And also, that's not really how it's presented in the original game, but you just kind of know that's how it works in this world. Anyway, but she also says stuff like, go get the treasure and stuff like that. You don't really get treasure in Princess Quest, unless you're implying that Princess Quest 3 is an arcade game that several kids are playing, in which I feel like she would mention grab the bunny mask and plush and magic purple key to fight the glitch rabbits. Like, she never says anything actually explicit to Princess Quest. She just mentions a maze and saving a princess as two separate objectives that happen in games. Which I'm like, that's fucking a million games. So many games fit those descriptions. Like, two of the biggest game series of all time end with you saving a princess, which are Mario and Zelda. And tons of games have mazes, especially like Pac-Man. Like, these are not... And how many games end with you getting treasure? Those are such generic statements about gaming. To say that they're like, oh, this is explicitly a Princess Quest reference, I feel like was extremely misleading. And a bit disingenuous overall. And while we can't assume all stories will have that level of unreliability, it's worth noting that what we are told about a story coming out is not necessarily exactly how the story itself presents things. Because I feel like Drowning was really trying to imply that the VR game is either... You could argue if it's a mimic shenanigans, but... Or possession, or magic, or whatever the fuck. Or the AI reconstituting Peggy's fears, or etc., however you want to look at it. But Peggy's whole character, for the sake of the story, is her guilt about something related to Kara she could have done, and is wondering, and how she's haunted by the idea that she could have done something about it. And we don't know what that thing was. And my problem with the whole Drowning is about Cassidy thing is it completely ignores the context of the story itself. In a weird way, it does what everyone complains about MatPat doing, where it drags in old characters to justify something happening, or to fit into something else. Like, it's one of those, I mentioned this in the Tales games, kind of two videos, the bonus video and the bonus video Squawkscast and the main video, that there is a lot of hypocrisy with a lot of the arguments I've seen thrown about, where people will trash talk like FNAF and Rytoast or MatPat or anyone who uses parallels in their theories, and saying like, oh, you're digging up old characters and dragging them into the story. And then people will do the same shit with Cassidy. Because, like, okay, let's say for this hypothetical, we're in the world where this princess was never named Cassidy. How the fuck do we get Princess Cassidy out of this? Because, yeah, there is stuff like, oh, the purple-eyed Chica staring at you. Or not the purple, I don't know why I specified purple-eye. Chica staring at you. However, that's like the problem of, like, that's just creepy imagery. And there's other shit that's, like, weird like that. And also, like, shouldn't Mangle be there? You know? Like, if we're trying to reference the dialogue in UCN, why isn't Mangle there staring at you? Because Mangle also says that. Or Mangle has interactions with the Vengeful Spirit where they're like, what's the exact line they have? I'm trying to remember. It's like, he's here and he's always watching the one. I think it's he's here and he's always watching the one you should not have killed. It's something like that. So shouldn't we have like Mangle somewhere in there, or any of the other characters from UCN? Because they're not really there for the most part. Why would only, like, it's a very niche and, like, poorly choreographed reference, in my opinion. should that be the case. But maybe that's subjective. Maybe I'm not really onto something like that. And then otherwise, you don't really have a lot of good Cassidy connections because it's like not a lot of good exclusive Cassidy connections, you know. And that's one of the more ones where I'm like, you could kind of argue that's more specific to Cassidy. But then it's like, oh, a pizzeria. It's like, I mean, Vanessa also goes through that, and it's Vanessa's Vanny. And Vanny has the graffiti in the room with the final Princess Quest cabinet. And the entire point of the Princess Quest plotline is to save Vanny. And even when we would go down to Ruin eventually, it's just the Vanny mask, and it's all about Vanny, and how when you put on the mask, the Vanny mask, you can see the sword put through the arcade with the glitch trap all around it. When you put on Vanny's mask, and it's like there's no reference of Cassidy anywhere, and it's like I said, Vanny's graffiti on the wall next to it, and it's in Vanny's hideout, and it's like I said, the whole point of Princess Quest is to save Vanny. And I know there's the whole argument of Cassidy defeats Afton or whatever, and that's why Vanny is freed. But I mean, no. Objectively, that's not true. It looks like Princess Quest has been defeated or destroyed or something like that in Ruin, and the Mimic is still around. But Vanny seems to be freed, which implies, like I said, all Princess Quest does is free Vanny. And why does Cassidy give a shit about that? Also, why does Cassidy have the power? I'm repeating a lot of shit I had in the Princess Quest is not Cassidy thing. But I feel like this is an important rant to understand why the books do this shit. Or why I feel like the problem with a lot of leaks is they give out an answer, or they pitch an answer a lot of times in leaks. And then that becomes the definitive answer in a lot of people's brains. When, if you actually look at the context of the games and the stories on themselves, they don't imply much. But they're used sometimes, in my opinion, as a crutch to justify a theory or interpretation the person has at the time. To finish my Princess Quest Cassidy rant, it's like everything in Ruin related to Princess Quest that you could argue connects back to Vanny. And the Mimic is still around. So if Cassidy is freed, whatever Cassidy is doing a shit job. Also, you really kind of are fucked with how Cassidy gets here. If you're a Stitchline Tales game believer, Andrew is the vengeful spirit and has moved on. And also, the only way you really interpret Cassidy being related to UCN is having them be the spirit that moves on, and that's what Golden Freddy twitching away is Golden Freddy leaving UCN, leaving only Andrew. With Happiest Day being like the send-off to Cassidy or whatever. That's the, like, otherwise, Cassidy has no point in the story, because if they're not freed, well, you need them to not be freed to get into Princess Quest. But also, you need them to be important enough to still be around, because why wouldn't they just go on with the other MCI spirits? But then, if they're still around, that implies the interpretation of UCN where they are the vengeful spirit tormenting William. In that case, if the Mimic isn't William, why is Cassidy not tormenting William still? Like, why would they give up tormenting William just to go fuck around in the security breach arc? Also, what happened to William's soul under that argument? I just want to make this clear, because there's so many problems Princess Cassidy makes just for the sake of the connection to the name. And like, oh, the other non-exclusive thing is that Cassidy is the sprite is gold, the princess is gold, and Vanessa's hair is yellow, so you could make that connection if you really want to, but that's about as deep as the black hair to Drowning Girl connection. Also, I just want to point out the Drowning Girl isn't described as looking anything like the kid we see in the logbook, if you believe that's Cassidy. And also, I feel like almost all of Drowning Girl's dialogue makes sense as a malevolent either AI or spirit that represents Peggy's guilt. like it's all like, pity me, I'm Kara. In fact, she like wonders a few times throughout the story, like, I'm Kara, or is that Kara calling me? And that's kind of one of those, like, oh, so is the story just lying to us and it's actually Cassidy? It's like, yeah, you could argue Peggy doesn't fully know what she's dealing with, but like the story outright implies it's Kara several times, and I feel like if you're willing to argue like it's about Cassidy, you have to consider the other options for this. And to me, the evidence points more towards Kara in the whole matter. But to get back to the original topic with Dittophobia, I think it already sounds like a similar situation. Though I can't say, I don't have the book. No one has the fucking book. Not even some of the people giving out the theories about like what it means, who have connections to people with the books, have the fucking book. I think, from what I can gather asking around of it, it seems like only maybe 3 or so people have the book right now. And as of recording this, there's still like a good month or so left for this damn book to come out. But what I can gather from it, from what I've seen of leaked pages and dialogue and all that, I feel like people are doing the thing they do with every goddamn book that comes out, which is, we have one piece of the lore, let's try to apply it to everything. This happened with this, like, I had an entire scrap script that kind of went along the lines of this, where I'm like, fucking everyone uses every new thing as the solution to everything. The sound discs were like the first big one, where it felt like every weird thing that didn't make sense was a character using a sound disc. The nightmares? No one would ever design animatronics that look that scary. Sound discs on generic endos that are actually the fun times. What could the phantoms be? Well, we occasionally hear high-pitched ringing, so it must be the sound discs. And Vanny's asked, how can it make sense there's a CRT filter in this game that uses filters several times throughout the game? Either he's a robot and/or it's sound discs. And there's a few other times where you could argue that people have applied that. People have used them on and off throughout the years. Robot Kids is another one where it's like, oh, just because the idea that someone could be a robot's opened up, anytime there's a kid who has anything that doesn't make sense, or we want to tie them to older characters, it's because they're a robot. And Remnant was another big one, where it's any supernatural thing that doesn't fully make sense is because it's powered by or has Remnant. Agony was like the even worse version of that, I would argue, where anything that could be supernatural just has agony from some tragedy. Like, you hear this shit all the time with, like, is this an agony monster? Like, I'm sorry, but not every fucking character in the series is an agony monster. I've never really been convinced by the Shadow animatronics are Eleanor logic. Because, I don't know, it's just like, where the fuck are there, like, why is Eleanor these two random characters? A, is like a smaller question, but, I mean, she does a lot of random shit, so who knows? And it's like, B, why the fuck anything with them, you know? Like, so Eleanor's around during FNAF 2? What the fuck? How? I don't know if it was just me, or maybe I really misread everything I've seen or been told. But isn't, like... I thought Eleanor was somehow related to, like, the wickedness or evil of Afton, somehow. But it's like... So has Eleanor existed since the murders? Like... That's a whole separate tangent of, like, people fucking applying everything from the books to be the solution to everything, and it's like... And then there's, like, and then parallels are another one that's existed for a while, which is, oh, this thing loosely resembles something from the main games, or something that happened prior in the series. Therefore, we are intentionally trying to retell stories. It's like, that's the other time where I feel like it oversteps its bounds. And that's not to say the books have no solutions. I'm just saying, like, this shit has happened time and time again where some new idea or thing is introduced, and it has to be the answer to every possible thing we could connect to it. And I feel like the overstepping the bounds this time is, while I feel FNAF, while I feel that it is reasonable to connect Rory's plotline in Dittophobia to FNAF 4's gameplay or the Dislocation Observatory rooms, I feel like those are reasonable because it does seem like those connections exist. What I feel is overstepping its bounds as Rory Midnight Motorist. That is the particular one, and that's not even me, like, as the Midnight Motorist launch my channel guy saying that. I am, just from what I've heard, I'm like, that doesn't... There's not a lot here that I've concretely seen from the leak pages that actually implies shit with Midnight Motorist to me, that much. But maybe that will change when I get the book. That is always the thing, is maybe it's better or worse than it sounds. But there's so much shit that has to happen for Rory Midnight Motorist to be true. It has to mean that Scott just had so much information we didn't have access to at the time of FNAF 6 and expected us to know. And which is why I tried to write that's why I tried to write Michael Motorist mostly around 6 prior information. But like, it answers questions like, so why the fuck were we fleshing out the whole kids' parents thing for this video? Or not for this video, for this minigame. Why were we fleshing out that entire plot line? Because it's like, you could argue... Maybe you could argue it's like, oh, why do we need this character or that character for Michael Motorist or whatever? And maybe you could argue it's a importance fallacy. Kind of like... This is something I've kind of poked not fun at, but like talked about, is the logic that the Crying Child has to be super important because he has so much screen time in FNAF 4. Which I feel like is often used to justify him being some other character or something. So it's like, you could argue it's that, or it's like, but it's like, I think it really comes down to me, what the fuck is half the minigame about then? Because yes, you could use Rory being kidnapped or being tricked into running off as an excuse to justify the runaway part of it. But then you have the fact that, in my opinion, there's never been a good version of the Spring Bonnie luring concept. I know there's this didn't exist for a while, but this became popularized as the idea of kidnapping grew in terms of Midnight Motorist answers, which is that William was wearing the suit and then steps out of it because it starts raining. But it's like, to me, that's not any better than shit like Scarecrow Theory. If you don't like Scarecrow Theory or think that's too absurd or specific, it's like, okay, so it requires that Afton, I guess, fucking side shuffles like a crab out of the bushes in Spring Bonnie, takes him off, I guess, floats or flies carrying Spring Bonnie with him. People were like, oh, even a Scarecrow would be kind of heavy or awkward for a kid to carry around. This is how people answer like Michael Motorist and shit. But, I mean, like, if Afton's stepping out of Spring Bonnie, where the fuck does Spring Bonnie go? Where is he? Like, and also, where's Afton's footprints? Shouldn't there be 2 sets of footprints if Afton's luring a kid or even kidnapping him? Because, like, because that's like the thing, like, it requires kind of Brick Afton kind of logic, where it's like, so he breaks the window and the kid just climbs out, I guess, or like whatever. It's really weird. Like I said, it requires like I think the most rational version of it is he side shuffles out of the bushes in costume. It starts to rain. I guess that bit of water doesn't kill him, even though there's like even less water when he dies of Springtrap, but whatever. Maybe the suit's newer, so it's in better condition. Climbs out of the suit, and then once again side shuffles a little bit just to be in a separate, like, just to be to the side of the footprints. I don't know, throws Spring Bonnie through the window or some shit, or I fucking breaks it with his bare hands. I like, how does he get something to break the window in this context if he was in Spring Bonnie prior? Was he holding a wrench as Spring Bonnie or a crowbar or some shit to break the window? The kid, I guess, for shits and giggles, goes out with him, or Afton tricks him into going out with him, or he, like, kidnaps him, which would contradict Rory Midnight Motorist, in my opinion, but whatever. We don't know the story, can't really say. And then, I guess, takes the kid with him, and in, like, one arm, and, like, under the other arm, Spring Bonnie, and walks off. And the dad's just like, yeah, he ran off again, don't worry about it. Or dad, or grouchy, screamy man. I guess it could be a girl for all we know. We don't know the gender of the player in Midnight Motorist. We just kind of assume it's a drunk dad, because that's kind of the trope. But couch person doesn't matter, I guess. Also, why was the kid running off? I guess under Rory Midnight Motorist, you could argue Rory just runs off because, I don't know, abusive dad or whatever. But I don't know what the fuck the mound was. Because, like, do we, like, so, okay. Afton being drunk because of juniors is kind of important. Because it sets up more about Afton's character than we prior had. It shows, like, this decline, this natural progression of who he is. Or this natural dissension of who he is, down becoming worse and worse, and kind of justifies the killing of Charlie, or not justifies, you know, it's the Thanos logic. You don't agree with the actions, but you can see more and more how we got there, and how we got to this bad, horrible situation. You know, like, it doesn't make it anything right, but you can, and it doesn't make it, like, any better. It just means, like, oh, okay, I get how he became corrupted, or how he became awful. It was like, you know, it's like one of those, if Afton's drunk and, like, depressed or whatever, it gives him a bit more reason to kill Charlie in, like, a scramble than, like, if he didn't, if you want to argue it that way. But it does shit like that, where it's like, oh, okay, Junior's just kind of justified then. But, like, does the dad need to be drunk to be mad at his kid if he's just some random guy, you know? Like, he doesn't even go to Junior's that night, so is he even fucking drunk? Whereas you could argue, like, for Afton Midnight Motorist, if he went to Junior's before the minigame, then gets kicked out that night, and then on that night goes back to Fredbear's or Freddy's and kills Charlie, that, like, adds a whole nother weight to Green Guy's line, where it's like, hey, man, you know you're not back here because he fucking got kicked out that night or some shit. And then it's like, the mound gets, like, no fucking explanations with Rory Midnight Motorist. Like, okay, if the mound, like, what the fuck is the mound? I can't figure out what the hell the mound would be under Rory Midnight Motorist, or even Kidnap Midnight Motorist. Because, to me, the best two explanations, the best in quotation marks, or it's something buried there, like a person or a character animatronic, or it's the hatch or an early entryway to Fredbear's, or not Fredbear, sister location. Or the early version of the bunker, whether it's Pizza World, whether it's the Circus Baby version of the bunker, or like an earlier version that's just a general underground facility. Or however you want to interpret it. But, like, neither of those really work with Rory and Midnight Motorist. Like, if it's the facility, why is Afton's facility fucking out near some random kid's house in the woods? Like, across from a bar. You know? And if it's buried, why? What's out there? What's buried? Rory, in the story, from what we have of the story, once again, nope, we don't have the story, who fucking knows? Or even other Strider stuff has nothing implied about, like, who buried shit there? Why? And it's like, it can't be the Twisted Ones, because why would, like, the whole point is that Afton's, under Rory Midnight Motors, is that Afton's going to kidnap the kid, drag him down to the experiment bunker to torture the kid. Right? So it can't be the Twisted Ones, because the whole fucking point is to kidnap the kids for that reason. It would be like, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. It'd be like if fucking Iron Man made drones to defeat the bad guy, to take him to to defeat the bad guy or beat up the bad guy, so he could take him to a prison for more robots to kill him or to kill the bad guy. It's like, why not just fucking make the original drones kill him, or why not just keep your experiments as the Twisted Ones haunting the kid? Why kidnap him, or why have the Twisted Ones at all? Pick one or the other. And that's never acknowledged in Rory's story from what we know. Once again, I don't have the book, who fucking knows. That Rory was already having nightmares of the characters or whatever prior, or already had whatever shit. And then you have, like, once again, if it's it's a person or like something like that buried, why there? Like, I think the least connected thing would be something like Susie's dog. But why? Why show Susie's dog in the minigame about a kid being kidnapped? Unless, and it's not like, if the story had said Susie was kidnapped and experimented on that bunker, or some shit, then we could see that connections to Midnight Motorist. Like, oh, that's the night Susie was kidnapped and she was lured shortly after. I mean, that doesn't work because the Midnight Motorist kid's he, but whatever. The runaway kid's supposed to say he, but I'm saying, like, if they did shit like that, then that would just be a Cassidy, or not Cassidy, a Charlie retcon name situation where it's like, oh, okay, this one's retconning he to being she or whatever, or some shit like that. If it was pulled that way, I feel like that would be pretty reasonable. Okay, I see how this connects to Midnight Motorist. The Mound is her dog buried, and, like, eventually one night, Afton comes by saying, hey, I got your dog, and that lures her to the bunker to be fucking killed or some shit. But that's not implied in the story. That's nowhere in the story. The kid in Midnight Motorist is he, which does line up with the Rory. But, like, okay, so let's say Rory is the kid in Midnight Motorist. What the fuck's the Mound? It's not like the crying child's going to be buried out there. Why the fuck would Afton bury him out randomly in the woods? Like, it's not only is it an unmarked gravestone, which is the main thing used against the crying child or a person being buried. Not only is it unmarked, but why there? Why near this random guy's house and bar? It's like even shit like Elizabeth being buried, which I've never bought. Doesn't fucking make sense on its logic. And it's like, yeah, you could argue. I remember someone saying that Rory ran away, and I might have read that in a page 2, but I don't know if I'm Mandela affecting myself there, and I can't really check because this is a fucking recording, and there'll just be like massive pauses of silence and clicking and typing and shit. I don't even know how to look for that, really. I don't know how to look specifically for that if that was a thing, because the fucking book isn't out, and it's only like leaks and random pages and shit. But anyway, as you can see, I'm kind of getting into it. It's like, oh, what I was trying to say was, I think there might have been a thing about Rory running away, which kind of would connect to Midnight Motorist, but it's like, is that connection worth not having answers to half the fucking minigame? You know, like, what do we draw the line at, like, being an answer for? Because I feel like what I'm kind of getting at with all of this is, much like with Drowning Girl, is Rory being the kid in Midnight Motorist actually what's trying to be said, or are people finding a way to make a connection to Midnight Motorist and using that to justify a headcanon they've had a while, probably kidnap Midnight Motorist? Or a theory, I should say. It's calling it headcanon's kind of dismissive in this context. Are people looking to justify a theory they've had for a while with something new that they can see connections with? Or is that what the actual story is trying to imply? And sometimes, it could be a mixed bag, which is what's complicated about this. I can't just dismiss it, because it's not like live readings and the leaks so far have been so unreliable that there's nothing to get out of it. But it's also not like there hasn't ever been a story that wasn't really portrayed fairly or accurately. Or there hasn't ever been a story that was portrayed inaccurately or poorly. Is how I should word that, I think. But you get what I'm fucking saying. That it's not like there hasn't ever been an unreliable telling of it. And maybe you could be a diehard Princess Cassidy believer and all that, but I just feel that as someone who read that story, that's not what the story was trying to say. And I don't get the sense that that's what Dittophobia is about, but who fucking knows? I don't have the book. No one really has the book except for 3 random people. You know? Well, not 3 random people, but like... You get what I'm saying with all of this. And the reason I bring that up so frequently is like... I think that's important. That's one of the frustrating things about the leaks, always, with this. Or especially the short story leaks. There's no way we can say they aren't true, or what the theories and people are making conclusions with aren't true, really. Because anyone could cherry pick good sections to support their claim out of a story that no one else has. If I am the only person with the text, I can cut out any of it and use it as proof, and you can't say I'm using it out of context, because you don't have it. And I think that's what's really unfair about the leaks as they're presented. It is all filtered through, it's all this huge game of telephone, where everyone is saying something that someone else said as proof for something in the discussion at the time. And often, people won't buy the books if they think they know what happens in them. Which just leads to people being stuck on, wait, isn't this the thing? Like, you see this all the time in, especially videos I have where they're talking about more modern or recent things. Where people are like, oh, I thought it was this. Or I'll treat something as matter of fact, like, I'll treat, I don't know, Molten MCIs being in question. And then people are like, but MatPat said that years ago, why is that in question? That's just part of how their accepted canon is, or something like that. Or X thing being X thing. Like, there's any interchangeable combination of it with anything I've said, or I treat as not confirmed, or whatever. Or even things I say, like, I've been debunked or bunked or whatever. And that same shit happens with books, where, like, people get their version of the story and their takeaway, and that just becomes the answer to them. And, like, I've actually had a very few, it's like a once or twice kind of thing, where people, like, were saying, like, you shouldn't be saying this shit if you're not 100% on it, because you're spreading misinformation in the community, and you don't understand how much sway you have. Like, I get that, and I feel like to some really big channels like Game Theory, you could make that argument. Maybe. But at the same time, everyone's saying what they think or want to talk about, you know? Like, when I make a theory, even if I'm not 100% on it, I say it because I'm interested in what people have to think about it often, or I think it's something interesting and worth talking about. There's a theory I've been really split on using that I actually recorded all the audio for. I wrote the entire script, obviously, called Shattered Elizabeth, which was all about what... It's kind of like the Molten MCI 2 videos that go over what if Molten MCI is wrong, and here's why it might be wrong. And that's where Rockstar MCI is from. And I know people like that was kind of one of those... It was kind of popular within my community and some people talking about it. But I think in the greater community it was pretty much dismissed pretty quickly. And not unreasonably. I don't think that was an absurd thing to, like, dismiss at all. Which is why I framed those 2 videos as, hey, I'm not saying this is the 100% solution or answer. I'm saying, hey, what about this? Think about this. And Shattered Elizabeth, the other video I wrote, like the Lost episode, if you want to say, is a lot like that. Where I do talk about Scrap Trap MCI, because the main theory isn't actually about the MCI at all. It's all about sister location. It's all about Baby and all about Elizabeth. And the theory that Elizabeth is split between all 4/5 fun times. I say 4/5, and then maybe I'll do a short video on this. Because I swear Scott can't make up his mind whether or not Bonbon counts. Because Bonbon gets to have her own entire section battling against you in sis location. I swear every fucking render of Ennard changes how the eyes work. And Molten Freddy has like tons of extra eyes. And when Ennard is spewed out of Mike in the sister location cutscenes, there's a purple eye in the bunch that I feel like, I mean, Bonbon's eyes are more, there's a purple eye and there's a pink eye. And it's like, okay, so Bonbon has pink eyes and there's 5 sets of eyes, like there's 5 eyeballs in the sewers in Midnight Motorist. I talked about Midnight Motorist too much, that's all I'm going to say. There's 5 eyeballs in the sewer shot of Sister Location Custom Night. And if you look at it in some videos, they look one of them looks brown, but trust me, if you look at the actual original sprite, it is green, blue, pink, purple, yellow. Sometimes purple looks brown depending on saturation and shit, so be wary of that. Cleaner, like for example, like the cleanest renders and stuff I can find of the encyclopedia shot of Molten Freddy shows that it also has a purple eye there. And I'm like, where does that come from? And Molten Freddy also has 1 green eye. So, and there's also the fact that Elizabeth's voice only appears when all parts are merged together. And Mike's whole mission in such locations is to put Elizabeth back together. And interestingly, while I've never really taken it super seriously, and that's why there's a lot of shit that's just shaky in that video that I wouldn't, that I'm like, part of what made me like not use it is I'm like, I feel like I'm being a bit hypocritical here. Like there's theories I've dismissed for stuff I'm using in this video occasionally. And one of them is I've never really taken too much stock in the crying child's in Molten Freddy because he says 1 big happy family. I feel like a lot of people think too much of the sister location, or not, the FNAF 6 dialogue as they're saying it directly to William. But sometimes there's a lot of the dialogue where I feel like they're just saying shit, you know? Like they're just kind of talking to themselves, or it's a lot like UCN where they're not really talking to anyone. They're just kind of saying their catchphrases and main quotes and all that. Like, why does Afton say, I always come back before killing Mike? Is it, like, in spite? Who fucking knows? There's a lot of dialogue where I'm like, I feel like they're just saying shit. But you could argue that if all of the fun times are Elizabeth's personality split up in chunks, then you could explain the 1 green eye being in Molten Freddy as a part of Baby is still in Molten Freddy, but all the parts that still love and adore and look up to William and still thinks it's Elizabeth to some extent is in Scrap Baby. And that could also explain why Baby, who, assuming Scrap Baby is mostly comprised of the parts of Baby that believe in William or look up to William still, are mostly in Baby, even if there's some doubts left in her. That could explain why Scrap Baby is the form taken. Scrap Baby's also the character made for Elizabeth, so the part that still looks up to and loves William would associate and attach on to Baby a ton. It explains why Baby has the whole thing of take out what is good. You could think of that as Elizabeth kind of like saying like, oh, take out the part of me that loves you and leave only the part that hates you, in a way that makes sense, if that makes sense. And that could also explain why so many of the characters try to kill you in that game. Because, yeah, if they're the MCI kids, they would still try to kill you regardless. That is another one of the many flaws of that video. But also, if Funtime Freddy, Foxy, and Ballora and all the other things are either shit where Elizabeth's remnant has been applied to other characters, and applied back to Elizabeth, then you could kind of justify that as like, oh, this is all the parts of Elizabeth's personality that hate William for leading to her death and shocking her and tormenting her in such location. And then the darkest part of that video, I think was the coolest part actually, was that the goal of the Remnant experiments was to try and isolate characters' personalities and identities. So, like, rip out the part of Elizabeth that loves you and make that the only Elizabeth, if that makes sense. And the kind of the conclusion I go with that video was Afton trying to see if he could take a kid's soul and then rip out the parts he wants and leave only the parts for what he wants, which would hypothetically be literally putting the crime child back together by taking chunks of kids like him, or taking chunks out of kids that are like him at least. Like the chunks are like the bite victim, not the kids are like the bite victim, for context. To reassemble him through remnant, all that shit. Or make a new copy or a kid or whatever. That was kind of where that video went. And you can probably think of a billion problems with that off the top of your head. That's why that video isn't released. That's why I did the retcon instead of that. That's why I did the one retcon video instead of that. But to get back to topic a little bit, just because you can find a solution, I don't think it makes the answer. Sometimes. Like, that's the other problem I felt like with Shatter Elizabeth is, while I felt like there was a lot of really cool ideas in that and a lot of cool pitches to that video, I feel like it would be unfair for me to genuinely imply this is the answer. And even in the cut of that video I recorded, I've tried to make it clear several times I'm just pitching something. But even that felt like I was kind of getting what I wanted to... I was trying to focus too much on what I wanted to be the video and what I wanted the story to be. That I felt like I was overstepping my bounds. And I felt like I was looking too much for, is there an answer for how you could get Molten MCI without... Or how you could get Molten Freddy and all that plot line without Molten MCI. And maybe I was onto something, I don't know. Maybe someone else will find the proof or the solid things that make those connections, and that actually is the intent. But like, as it was unfinished and rough. And it felt like I just was too uncertain about presenting it that way. And I felt like I was going too much with what I wanted, or an easy cop-out or answer. Even though, frankly, Shadow Elizabeth is really fucking cool with some of its points. I think it's really in character and a lot more, I don't know, FNAF-y than Robot Kids. The idea that William would psychologically torment kids, Joker style, like, if you're thinking of the Batman Beyond movie with Joker, tormenting, which Robin is it supposed to be? Is it supposed to be Damien Todd or Jason Todd, or... It's definitely not... No, because fucking... Dick Grayson already moved on, I think, at that point. So it can't be... him. Would it be Damien? I don't know. I don't know. Some of the later Robins I don't know as much. I don't know which Robin is supposed to be in the Batman Beyond movie. Anyway, that's a whole separate tangent. But the idea that he's doing something like that with a kid he captures to try and brute force them into being something like that. And that video also went into detail of how the fun times would interlock to kill one kid collaboratively. Which would also be why they all have remnant related. Is like every one of them plays their part in killing one kid, if that makes sense. But that's all for that video, which may or may not ever come out. Maybe I'll release it as a special or a bonus. Or just if I have no other videos kicking around or whatever. But I've been going off topic a lot in this video. Or this rant, or whatever the hell this is. But it all goes to the point where sometimes the shit we're given isn't really what it looks like. And like I said, I feel like people want an answer to Midnight Motorist so bad that they're willing to take the first thing they can get that feels on topic enough that they can link it back to it. As for what I actually think Dittophobia means for the lore, I would say I feel Dittophobia is just confirming Afton experiments on kids more than anything. And that the nightmares are something scientific and not literal nightmares. I mean, technically they are literal nightmares still. but they're not naturally induced. They're not just, oh, I'm scared, here's thing happening. And they're not soundness, because the other thing it confirms. Now, I don't think it deconfirms anything that, like, okay, other shit we have to account for. Michael is confirmed to have encountered the nightmares. And we have to figure out when the fuck that means. Oh, here's something else I didn't talk... that was on my brain, but I didn't really say it before. Another problem Rory Midnight Motorist has is it doesn't explain later that night's connection that well. And it also, like, avoids a lot of solutions we could get, but it also... Damn it, I was on something there. I had, like, the neurons connected for a split second. Damn it, I was going to say something that I'm like, that's an interesting point. That I really should say in the video. I'll just rant about random shit until it reconnects. So I'm saying... We know Mike has interacted with the nightmares. And... Okay, what was I getting at there? Mike was interacting with the nightmares. We know... He's interacted with at least Nightmare Fredbear. So... And we can also make some conclusions like... Maybe you could argue that Rory Midnight Motors confirms just like this is after 1 because of the whole 10-year metric. But like that raises some weird timeline shit. So it's like it's just like Sister Location would have to be after Rory is there because the fun times are still there from what we have in the story so far revealed in confirmed actual concrete pages. The fun times haven't left yet, so it's before Sister Location's gameplay. But also the fun times brain rot. God, what the fuck am I talking about? But also, like, so that means it has to, like I said, there has to be, like, the bunker has to exist for 10 years. Now, we don't know if the sister location half of it already existed in that 10 years. That's what's tricky about this shit. And maybe the full story, maybe when we have the full story to read of ourselves, we can get more out of that. But then there's questions like, fucking, who knows? You know, like, this is something I've always been like, did the sister location half of that bunker always, or did the baby part of that bunker always exist? Or was it a bunker William had and stuffed and like threw the characters down there when he ran out? Or when he had like nowhere else to put them? And decided to get a bit more cash out of them by doing the rental service. Or get souls or remnant or whatever the fuck you want to argue out of it. There's something about Rory that bugged me that I wanted to talk about. I'm trying to figure out what it was. Saw nightmares. I'm trying to confirm. What does it confirm? What was I getting at with it? God, now it's driving me crazy now. What was I getting at with Rory and the nightmares and Mike? People also use this to justify the idea that Crying Child has also experienced FNAF 4's events, which, like, maybe it does. But then it's like, when you go that early in the timeline, what was the original fucking point? Because I could see something where, like, after it's tormenting kids to see if the more tragedy they experience before they die means more remnant or whatever, or more soul juice or whatever the fuck, or agony. I could see something like that, but then that runs into the problem of, like, every Funtime 83 kind of variant happens, like, to run into, which is, like, why? Why was... Like, there's the whole thing of, like, he was always crazy, which is why he kills Charlie. But, like, why the remnant shit that early? So it's like, if the Crying Child has experienced the nightmares and the horror shit, all that, like, why that early? The other thing I can't really gather from this is, what the fuck was Afton even getting at with the nightmare shit? Like, why is fear response so important? Like, he's trying to fucking kill kids. It doesn't matter how scared they are. If you stab them, they die. And it's not like that helps his job. His job is to fucking make kids happy and shit. That's like his actual role in a business. So like I said, it has to be something remnant related that like scaring them gets a reward for. Or he has to have some reason to want to scare kids. Unless he's just a sadistic fucker, which at what point, why did he automate it, you know? Shouldn't he want to be pretty hands-on with it all, or like play back the footage or some shit? And then there's like, fucking, the other weird thing is, why was Rory in there for 10 years? Unless Afton died at the start of it. Like, how long was Afton planning to run the experiment? So if the experiment's been running for 10 years, and we're assuming Afton died near the start of it, which is why he never stopped the experiment, does that mean Central Location's in like 2003 or some shit? Or sometime after like FNAF 1? Don't have the book, no one knows. What's the bit there? Like, you know, like what's the 10-year shit is so weird. Like, if he was there for only a few months or a year, we could easily see it as, oh, this is the year Afton dies. Maybe. Which would also throw another hole in Midnight Moaners, but whatever. Because that would explain, like, oh, why was Afton using the Springtrap that late? And also, why wasn't he killed by the spirits before if he was going to make trips to Springtrap? And also, why was Springtrap in the back room if he was already using it in his own personal time? Which is another point. It's like, we don't have any proof in the main games or even the Tales book that or even maybe with Frights. Is there a thing I'm missing with Frights? That Afton would physically wear the costume outside of the building? That is kind of a thing in the novel, so that maybe works. But, like, there's that whole thing of, like, so Afton was just able to take Spring Bonnie wherever the fuck he wanted. That's pretty weird to me, personally. That raises kind of some questions. Fucking, there's so much shit I could say with Scraptrap MCI, or not Scraptrap, with Springtrap, or Spring Bonnie being in Midnight Motorist. I've said a lot already on that. Yeah, this wasn't the thing I was going to talk about, but it is a question raised. It's like, so what is the point of Mike with the fun nightmares if they're an artificially generated thing? I could easily see an argument with Mike where it's like, oh, William wants to torment him for killing the bite victim. But it's like, okay, and like, is this just supposed to show that William is a sadistic fucker? Like, I guess that's the thing. But you would go on to do it with other kids, so it's like, okay, I guess he got his chuckles and laughs and he just left. And I guess Mike just left or whatever. But that's okay, here's the other fucking thing. Now play this either way you want. So in the logbook, Mike draws Nightmare Fredbear in response to either one of the two. Either he's responding to Cassidy's questions about, I have the logbook. Let me check this specifically. I want to check specifically how Cassidy asked the question. Is it earlier? It's on the earlier pages. Okay. Do you have dreams? Is how Cassidy asks questions, and Mike responds with Nightmare Fredbear. Now, here's the other weird thing. The only other prompt that would get Mike to draw this, or is in reasonable distance, is Use this page and the next page to sketch and write out your notes on your recent dreams. Reflect on the meaning of your dreams. So either this confirms he's interacting with Cassidy here, or he's having recent dreams that involve Nightmare Fredbear. Pick your poison. And if he's having recent dreams, how the fuck under the story of Dittophobia? The logbook, timeline-wise, that fucking doesn't work at all. Like, completely broken. The logbook is after Sister Location. But, right? Sister Location, no more animatronics in there. In Rory's story, the Sister Location animatronics are there, and he's been there in Observation 2 with a question mark. I don't know if it's confirmed it's Observation 2, or we just assume it is. Or how much is there? No one knows the book. Who fucking knows? Maybe I think it's the one that people say matches the FNAF 4 gameplay room the most. And that's the layout of Observation 2. So it's probably people are probably going to stand by its Observation 2. So let's say it's that one. Is in Observation 2. Let's say, for the sake of this, who fucking cares? If he's in there for 10 years, obviously Mike can't fucking be there. That raises a question there of like, okay, so when did Mike see Nightmare Fredbear? Because it can't be, like I said, we've established that Rory's story has to be before Sister Location. But if he's saying recent dreams, but after Sister Location, I don't know, did he fucking go down there just to trip out for shits and giggles? Like, why would he be gassing himself? Especially since it's like, yeah, it's automated, but why is he down there? He clearly doesn't need to be down there. If he's having recent dreams after the events of Midnight Motorist. Or after the events of Sister Location. So, I feel like the most rational option now, if you want to argue Tales games, and you want to argue Dittophobia as a literal story that happens, in the game continuity, then the only way you don't have a timeline error is if Mike is responding to Cassidy and not anything to do with the original prompt. Which maybe you could extrapolate some of your own shit out of that, but I just want to point that out. There's other reasons to think he's talking to Cassidy in the book, but that would just be one of the most solid, definitive examples. But that's what we're talking about and considering. Anyway, my voice is sore, and I may or may not be going to PAX West soon. So I need to go to bed at this point to get up early, because Seattle is not far from where I live. But oh boy, it's not close. It's a multi-hour drive, I'll leave it at that. I just had to avoid doxing myself. I have about an hour of audio here that I think I'll just let quickly render or some shit with, I don't know, maybe some me drawing footage. Or some shit.